Ancient Egypt is remembered for pyramids and pharaohs. Google is remembered for algorithms and code. On the surface, nothing connects them. But here's the contradiction. The more primitive civilization actually solved the trust problem in information first, and Google's entire founding algorithm is, at its core, a math-powered version of a very old Egyptian idea. One used scribes vouching for scribes. One uses links vouching for links. Same logic for 1,000 years apart. By the end of this video, you'll never look at a Google search bar the same way again. Imagine you're an official serving the pharaoh, and your job is simple to describe, but almost impossible to do. You need to know exactly how much grain 200 villages harvested this season. Not an estimate, the real number. That number decides how much tax is owed, how much grain gets stored for the lean years, and whether the kingdom eats through the next flood cycle. But you can't visit 200 villages yourself. You can't personally watch every harvest, weigh every sack, or vouch for every farmer's honesty. So what do you actually build to make that number trustworthy? This is the same wall every growing system eventually hits. When a group is small, trust runs on memory and reputation. You know who lies and who doesn't. But once a system outgrows what one person can personally verify, that kind of trust stops working. Something else has to take its place. A structure, a method, a way to know what's true without knowing everyone involved. Egypt hit this wall managing grain, land, and labor across an empire. Centuries later, the early internet hit the exact same wall, except instead of 200 villages, it was millions of web pages, and instead of grain totals, it was answers. Same wall, in a completely different world. And the two solutions, built thousands of years apart, turn out to rhyme more than you'd expect. Egypt's answer to this problem wasn't just writing things down. Writing alone doesn't solve anything if you still can't tell who's telling the truth. What Egypt actually built was a system for checking the truth, not just recording it. The first piece of that system was the scribes themselves. In Egypt, a scribe wasn't just someone who could read and write. Becoming a scribe required years of training, testing, and formal approval from the state. That mattered because it meant a scribe's word carried weight for a specific reason. The government had already checked him out before he ever checked anything for you. This is worth pausing on, because it's easy to assume Egypt trusted scribes simply because they were literate. It didn't. It trusted them because they had been certified. Literacy made the recording possible. Certification made the record believable. The second piece was standardization. Egypt kept detailed land registers, one of the best known being the Wilbour Papyrus, which recorded individual plots of land, who held them, including temples and officials, and exactly what taxes each plot owed. Because every scribe across the kingdom filled out records in the same format, a tax official in the capital could compare numbers from different provinces and actually make sense of them. Without that shared structure, records from different regions would have been useless side by side. The third piece was auditing, built directly into daily work. Tomb paintings from ancient Egypt show grain being brought into royal granaries with both an overseer and a scribe present at the same time, independently confirming the amount. That's not just documentation. That's a live cross-check, two sets of eyes on the same transaction, designed specifically to catch a false number before it became an official one. The fourth piece was tracking people and labor at a distance. At Deir el-Medina, the village that housed the workers who built the royal tombs, administrators kept detailed labor registers. These recorded who showed up for work, who didn't, what rations were paid out in bread and beer, and even disputes between workers. An administrator sitting far from the actual work site could still know, with real confidence, what was happening there. Put together, these four pieces formed something bigger than record-keeping. Egypt had built a working trust system. Certified people, standardized formats, and constant cross-checking, all designed to answer one question at massive scale. How do you know something is true when you didn't see it happen yourself? That system worked for a very long time, but it depended on a fixed, human-sized world, a knowable number of scribes, villages, and records. The next time this exact problem resurfaced, it wouldn't be a few hundred villages. It would be millions of unrelated pages, appearing and disappearing every day, with no scribe, no overseer, and no state to certify any of it. By the mid-1990s, the internet had created a version of Egypt's problem that no state, editor, or credentialing body could keep up with. Anyone could publish a web page. Nobody was checking it, approving it, or vouching for it the way Egypt vouched for its scribes. And the search engines built to make sense of all these pages had a serious weakness. They ranked results mainly by matching keywords, which meant a page could rank higher simply by repeating the right words over and over, sometimes hidden from view entirely. The system was trusting pages based on what they claimed about themselves, and that trust was easy to fake. Two Stanford graduate students, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, started working on a different approach in 1996 under the project named BackRub. Their idea was to stop asking what a page said about itself and start asking something else entirely. Who else on the web was willing to link to it? That idea became PageRank. The core logic is simple to state. A link from one page to another works like a vote of confidence. But not all votes count equally. A link coming from a page that is already considered important carries more weight than a link from an obscure, unknown page. And because that importance is calculated by looking at the links pointing to every other page as well, the whole system becomes recursive. Each page's importance is partly built from the importance of the pages vouching for it. This is worth sitting with for a moment, because it's not just a clever math trick. It's a direct answer to the same problem Egypt faced. Instead of a certified human scribe vouching for a record, you now have an established web page effectively vouching for another page, and that vouching can be measured and calculated instead of assigned by a state office. By 1998, Google had indexed roughly 24 million web pages using this method, and it was already outperforming established search engines like Yahoo, Excite, and Hotbot in the relevance of its results, according to contemporary reporting at the time. The numbers mattered here. This wasn't a small-scale experiment anymore. It was a working answer to the exact scale problem that made keyword search fall apart in the first place. Of course, once link-based trust became valuable, people immediately tried to fake it, building networks of fake links purely to inflate a page's ranking. Google had to keep refining its system continuously to catch that kind of manipulation, in much the same way Egypt's Granary audits existed specifically because scribes could be bribed or careless. The tools were completely different. The underlying threat was not. Strip away the papyrus and the code, and these two systems are doing something remarkably similar underneath. Both replace direct, personal verification with what we might call trust by proxy. Neither Egypt nor Google actually verifies the thing itself every time. Egypt verified a scribe's credentials once, then trusted the records that scribe produced, backed up by an overseer checking his work. Google doesn't verify the truth of a web page directly. It measures how many other pages, and how important those pages are willing to point to it. In both cases, the system isn't asking, is this true? It's asking, who is willing to stake their own credibility on this being true? That shared mechanism produces some real similarities worth naming directly. In both systems, reputation compounds over time. A senior, long-established scribe carried more institutional weight than a newly trained one. The same way an old, well-linked website carries more ranking power than a brand-new page with no links pointing to it yet. In both systems, the moment trust became valuable, people tried to fake it. Egypt had to guard against scribes colluding or falsifying numbers. Google had to guard against link farms and keyword manipulation. And in both systems, verification was never a one-time event. It had to happen continuously. Egypt's Granary audits repeated with every harvest. Google's ranking algorithm updates constantly to catch new manipulation as it appears. But the comparison has real limits, and it's worth being honest about where it breaks down rather than forcing a tidy symmetry that isn't actually there. Egypt's system was centralized. One state, one hierarchy, one final authority deciding who counted as a certified scribe. Google's system is decentralized by design. No central office approves which websites are allowed to link to which others. The rankings emerge from the aggregate behavior of the entire web, with no single authority controlling it. Egypt was also working with a finite, knowable set of facts. A specific harvest, from a specific village, in a specific year. Google is trying to estimate trust across a dataset that never stops growing and can never be fully checked at the source. And the pace of each system reflects that difference. Egyptian land registers were durable, but slow to update, sometimes lagging behind reality for a long stretch of time. Google's rankings shift continuously as new links appear and disappear. Perhaps the clearest difference is what's actually doing the vouching. In Egypt, it was a person, someone with a name, a reputation, and real accountability if they were caught lying. In Google's system, it's a hyperlink, an object with no accountability of its own, which is exactly why it was so much easier to exploit in the algorithm's early years. So why would two civilizations with absolutely no connection to each other, separated by roughly 4,000 years, land on such a similar underlying idea? The likely answer is that this isn't really about Egypt or about Google specifically. It's about what happens to any system once it grows past the point where one person can check everything themselves. At that threshold, direct verification simply stops being possible, no matter how much anyone might want it. What replaces it, again and again across history, is delegated trust, verification handed off to a network of credentialed people or credentialed signals, rather than confirmed firsthand by any single observer. You can see the same basic structure in peer review, where a scientific claim gains credibility because other trained experts have checked it, not because any one reader personally reran the experiment. You can see it in credit scores, where a lender trusts a number built from a long trail of past financial behavior rather than personally investigating a borrower's life. You can see it in professional licensing, where a patient trusts a doctor's competence because a medical board already verified it, not because the patient tested that competence directly. Once you notice this pattern, it becomes difficult to view a Google search result, a 5-star product rating, a news headline, or a professional credential the same way again. Each one is running on the same basic architecture Egypt built for grain counts and Google built for the web. Direct verification was quietly replaced by trust in a system, and the system itself is doing work most people never think to examine. So here's the question worth sitting with. Somewhere in your life right now, you're trusting a proxy, a rating, a review, a headline, a credential, instead of verifying the thing itself. What is it, and do you actually know how that trust was built? Drop it in the comments. I'd genuinely like to know which invisible trust system you rely on most.